Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
In this thread, local urban legends. What are some urban legends or notorious places in your area? I'm currently in Washington, but I'm from a small town in Georgia. As it always is with small towns, there's a ton of urban legends that float around. We've got your usual Bigfoot nutcases and some werewolf allegations several years ago. But the one that stands out the most is about a winding road that cuts through the Appalachian Trail and through our town. Apparently, one night in December, sometime in the 70s, the roads were particularly icy. A young college couple were taking the pass through the mountains on their way to North Carolina, and the car skidded around a blind curve and tumbled down a mountain. The legend is that if you take that same curve at night, right before you hit the actual turn, you might catch sight of a young couple walking by the side of the road in winter gear. It's not unusual for folks in the mountains to report people walking on the ride of those roads, because oftentimes that means they need assistance. But the weird thing is that when police and highway patrol come to check it out, there's no sign of the couple on any stretch of the roads. That's really the only big one, though.
It's not really an urban legend, just some shit people I know went through. I live on an island in Nova Scotia, and we have an old dirt road that was replaced. It's called Old Branch Road, but we all call it the Old Branch. It's a shitty beat-up dirt road surrounded by woods and a couple clearings. People steal cars and burn them out there, dump trash, etc. Makes the place look pretty damn creepy. The thing is, it's creepier than that. I've done research on the road and there are a couple stories that I found to be true. 2 confirmed deaths by hanging from a tree. 2 teens parked too far into a snowbank in the 70s and suffocated because they fell asleep with the car running after a nice session of How's Ya Father. A handicapped man was picked up at a gas station, taken out there and brutally beaten to death. And finally, a murder self-termination. There was a canteen-type store at the mouth of this road that was a popular hangout back in the 60s. The owner and his family lived in a house connected to the canteen. You know, the old jukebox soda pop place. One day the owner snapped and shot his wife with a shotgun and then went behind the place and proceeded to blow his own head off. Their son continued living there but was screwed up. My father recalls going to parties there after the fact and the guy was just strange, with reason. So that's the history of the road. Here's where it gets good. You see, I grew up with a brother 10 years older than me. He's a bit of a bullshitter and he was into drugs and drinking from an early age. They started getting smart with their underage drinking around 17. They started watching the weather forecast and setting up tents in the woods of the Old Branch, along with tarps and everything, and burying their alcohol so that after school, as if they even went to school LOL, they could just start drinking as soon as they hit the spot. So this was a Wednesday. They were soberly getting ready for Friday out the Old Branch, setting up tents, tarps. It's about a 5-minute walk into the woods with a very open and clear path that you cannot possibly miss. The sun was setting when they saw a woman just walking in a thick wooded area. Them, being teenagers, started yelling at her and she stopped and looked at them, just staring. Being the assholes they are, they started throwing rocks at her and causing a ruckus. And then one of them started walking towards her. She drifted back into the trees and was gone. They were about ready to leave anyway, but now they could not find the path. This path is large, but they simply could not find it. Looked all over. It's not there. They ended up lost for about 5 hours. I didn't believe my brother, but one day I ran into one of his friends when I was like 21. This is like 12 years later, and he asked me what I was doing the weekend, and I talked about hanging around the Old Branch as me and my friends had recently taken a liking to. He turned completely white and told me he would never step foot on that road again. I still didn't quite believe it until a similar story came from my own friends while they were out there one night. I wasn't present for it, but I also never told them that story. My own story deals with the homeless. So one day I'm with a few friends and we decide to head out the old branch in my buddy's Cavalier. We got so far down and turned the car around, and the driver pulled out a pipe and a couple people in the car started smoking. A guy that was sometimes around was all against smoking and got out of the car and began walking. It's about a 45-minute walk from here, and the driver felt bad, so he put the pipe away and we tried to get him back in the car. He just kept walking, and we were driving beside him, asking him to at least get a drive to the end of the road. He then jumped off the road and into the woods but stopped dead in his tracks. We looked and then realized there was a man also standing there in the woods. Long beard, a bandana, dirty old flannel shirt, gross jeans, holding a stick and just staring at our friend. Our friend went back to the road and continued walking. We're not begging him to get into the car because that was weird. This was the first time we've seen anyone out there that wasn't on a horse or in a car. No cars were parked by and Buddy was dirty, so we're pretty rattled. Friend still refuses to get into the car and I looked back. Guy with stick is now walking on the road following us. My friend still refuses. Oh my shit. The guy kept his distance, but it was sketchy. At this point I look back just in time to see a second person emerge from the woods. This guy is younger, but still dirty, wearing a torn-up corn sweater and holding his own stick. They're walking, staring at us and being sketchy. Our other friend got out and walked with our friend with a baseball bat, and we drove slowly, making sure nothing happened. We finally got near the end of the road, near a graveyard and a little crypt thing. You can see the highway from here, and the guys just stopped and watched us as we got off the road. As I looked back, they walked back into the woods. Been there a few times since.
Miramichi, New Brunswick, Canada. How about some maritime ghost stories, eh? The Headless Nun. She is associated with French Fort Cove in Norden, now called Miramichi. There is a guided tour every Halloween. I live not 6 miles from there. The tale dates back to the 1700s. The Headless Nun was a resident of the area by the name of Sister Marie Inconnue. Inconnue means unknown in French, as the sister's history is relatively unknown. Details of the story are vague. Mostly it is bar talk and wives' tales, but the most consistent story I have heard of her is that 2 sailors, presumed pirates, tortured her for the information on a treasure buried somewhere on French Fort Cove. Information she held until her dying breath, so the pirates beheaded her. Now she wanders in search of her head and will not divulge her secret save to someone who has no greed for the treasure's value. You must not want it for personal gain. Dungarvan Hooper, the W is silent, immortalized by a song written by Michael Whalen. There was an alleged murder by the Dungarvan River in New Brunswick during the mid to late 19th century. The story is about a young Irish cook named Ryan in 99% of the retellings. Ryan moved to a lumber camp somewhere near the Dungarvan and brought with him all of his possessions, including a small satchel for carrying money. When all of the lumbermen went out for work one day, the young cook Ryan was left with the camp boss, who decided he wanted to rob Ryan and then chase him away. The crew returned and the boss explained that Ryan had taken ill suddenly. Some say that the boss said Ryan suffered a mishap and had to be buried in the woods. However, a spine-chilling whoop-whooping prevents the lumbermen from falling asleep one night. They assume it's the ghost of Ryan and they flee. The lumber boss's body was discovered with coins forcefully shoved into his eye sockets, quite violently. Reverend Edward Murdoch, a Roman Catholic priest from Renew, performed an exorcism at the alleged burial site of Ryan's body, which is now called Whooper Spring. It has been rumored that the exorcisms persist to this day, as some might tell you Whooper Spring is a demonic hotspot.
There's this huge cistern well-type thing in my town. American here, by the way, Kansas represented. Basically, it's a huge semicircle type building made up mostly of corridors and passageways. It's the middle that's actually interesting. The middle of the structure is a completely hollow 500 by 500 feet room with a huge rectangular well that's around 400 by 350 of the space in the room, with a fairly tiny catwalk surrounding the pit. It's around 200 feet deep and is kept filled with water. For some reason, the lights don't reflect off of the water like they should, and when you look down into the water, all you see is just this seamless, empty blackness. It's like looking into a deep hole rather than water, honestly. To add a cherry to the shit sundae, if you were to slip and fall in, you wouldn't have anything to grab onto except for this small, crappy ladder on the far left wall. And people did fall in. Frequently, in fact. There was almost no security to speak of, given that it was a small town in the late 1970s, so you could just walk in if you wanted to. The door to the water room was unlocked, for some weird reason I've never been too sure about. Anyhow, these dumbass teenagers thought it would be a great idea to go down there with their younger brothers and sisters and check the place out at about 4 a.m. in the morning or so. They found their way to the water room and proceeded to do the stupidest shit ever and play on the balcony. As they goofed around, one of the smaller children fell into the well. His older brother jumped in after him, and they both ended up drowning. After that incident, the place was locked down pretty well and the doors were kept locked. Supposedly, if you go to this place late at night and look into the water, you'll see the faces of everyone who ever drowned in that creepy black pit staring at you. Their eyes rotted and their skin horribly flayed, floating about them in a flimsy cloud of barely contained human epidermis.
I live in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Besides the regular haunted houses, half the city was built for the Portuguese royal family, and from 1803 to 1900, a whole neighborhood was built for them to live in. This is called the Quinta da Boa Vista. Nowadays, the buildings have been converted into a national museum and a zoo, but most of the buildings have been preserved. It is against the law to change them in any way, aside from maintenance, giving off quite an old-timey atmosphere. I've been there myself. The place is gorgeous, but according to local news, many night guards have given up their jobs due to the hauntings in the royal palace, where the museum currently is. At night, when most of the lights of the entire neighborhood are turned off to preserve local fauna, it's almost as if you're back in the 19th century. Security has claimed some members of the royal family still roam through the gardens at night. Typing machines can be heard coming from their former bedrooms, and even the sound of carriages and horses have been heard through the obviously closed and gated streets. Their other palace in the city of Petropolis is also haunted. Also been there, and apparently you can hear a bunch of footsteps, despite the fact only 15 people are allowed inside at a time, hear crying and pleas coming from the room where the torture gear was placed for viewing. And a couple years ago, an elderly night guard had a heart attack when he went into a hall with a huge picture of Dom Pedro, and as he went across the room, the picture supposedly turned its head sideways and stared straight at him.
Knowle Village, Hampshire. I worked on the first 50 or so houses in the area, and it was terrifying. I mean, it started out normal enough, but by the end of it, me and the guys on that contract outright refused to sign on for the next part of the development. Basically, they built a pop-up new build village in the grounds of an old lunatic asylum, on the edge of the asylum graveyard, turned the old asylum into apartments, and still have a secure mental facility in the area that took over from the old one. We had everything: bumps, noises, things out of the corner of your eye. It got to the point where none of us would work in one of the houses alone. And I'm talking big, non-superstitious builders, carpenters, plumbers, etc. Fuck that, would I go back there? We'll try and flesh some of that out with a Greentext, but the place is still damn scary now. Okay, a bit more background and I'll give you some specific examples. So the place starts getting built, and I didn't actually get there until maybe half the new houses are up and nearly complete. The houses were built at the same time as the asylum was being converted into apartments, so it was a fairly busy area. It was still dark getting to work in the mornings, and at the time, if you look at the place on Google. There was only the eastern access road to come in or out by. Most of us drove in, or shared a drive because if nothing else, just the approach road took ages to walk, and it was just fields on either side, not really good for pedestrians. The only thing that put me off was the fact that next door was a fully working secure unit, which took over from the old hospital. There was an escape while we were there too, more later if anyone cares. So basically we had all the perfect elements there: cemetery, old asylum, new secure asylum, middle of nowhere, dark for half the working day. The first few weeks were fine. There were little things which should have freaked me out, but nothing that couldn't be put down to me being either busy, forgetful, or dumb. Like leaving tools out and finding one of them in the next room. You kind of put that shit down to someone borrowing it. Or hearing voices in the next room, or above you, or below you. It's all standard crap on a construction site. But then we went over to a close-out procedure on the houses, which basically means they get locked up tight because they're nearly finished, and they don't want people stomping in and damaging things. So you have to sign out a key to work in there, and then sign it back in, no exceptions. Plus, you had to keep the place locked while you were in there to stop people wandering into the houses being worked on for the same reason. Basically, any damage in the place during the time you were working there got charged to your company. Nice. That was when we all started to get a bit freaked out. Working on a bath, head underneath making off connections. Hear someone coming up the stairs. Slide out and sit up thinking it's the site agent coming to check up on me. Nothing. Go look. Nobody there. Check all the other rooms. Nobody here. Front and back door still locked. Shrug and go back to work. Hear the sound of someone sprinting up the stairs. Nope. .jpg. Push out again and jump to my feet like there's impending doom. Still nothing. And my heart is going 100 beats a second. Leave, lock up, and go find my friend 3 doors down. And we spend the rest of the day working in the same house. Same company, so no issue. Told him what had happened, and he told me he'd spent the whole morning thinking he could hear the people working in the house next door talking to each other. When I pointed out he was in an end-of-row house, he completely freaked out. So we had enough of the houses fairly quickly, but as long as we worked together in them, it wasn't too big a problem. There were still noises, but it was much easier to pretend it was down to new houses settling in than anything nasty. We were all still really jumpy, though. I mean, even legitimate noises were by now making us jump. Anyway, I get a call. There's a leak in one of the houses on my row. Fuck, haven't screwed up a joint in years. Go take a look with my now joint at the hip mate in tow. It's in the attic. Great. Climb up through the loft hatch and shine a torch around while Steve is looking at ceilings below. Anon, it's the front bedroom. Water coming through the light. Crawl towards the front. It's the feed to the water tank. Easy fix. Start tightening up the connection, which is fairly loose. Hear something moving around, really slowly, very softly on the insulation. Stop what I'm doing and look around with the torch, starting to panic. Nothing there. Straining to look all the way behind me. Suddenly there's a really loud hiss, not like a cat or steam or anything like that. Like someone is so angry they can't even make an appropriate noise. Get shoved in the chest so hard I go over backwards. I'm only a skinny guy. I fell straight between the rafters, through the plasterboard ceiling, and landed flat on my back in the bedroom below. Oh shit, the agony. Literally think my back is broken. Steve stood there. Oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, and tries to help me up. Thank God nothing was broken, or he'd have made it worse. Didn't even have a concussion, but God, I hurt all over. Hobble out of the house with help as fast as we can, while I try to tell him what happened. The place was full of people for days repairing the ceiling, rewiring the light. Nobody saw anything strange after that. Then I got charged for the damage.
You got charged for the damage. You should have sued their asses into the next century for that assholery.
If only their argument was it was entirely my fault for being clumsy. Not really sure what else I could have done to avoid it, though. They should have at least been putting chipboard floors down in the attics for storage space. Twats. When I said the same company, so no problem before, I meant because we worked for the same firm we could double up on the key. They wouldn't let different trades work in the same house, but 2 guys with the same trade was fine. So the next day's events didn't exactly help everyone's nerves either. At this point, we've basically come to the conclusion that the whole place is haunted, so we're all going to stay in pairs as a minimum. A big plus point in our favor, the electricians got the power on, so we now had streetlights and lighting in the houses to keep the dark mornings and evenings at bay. Anyway, I digress. Driving in on the approach road, streetlights now on, hurrah. See someone walking along the road towards us. Streetlights are quite spread out, so he's going between light and dark patches as he's cresting the rise in the road. We're not far from him now, about to catch him in the headlights, and this guy sort of turns towards the fence at the edge of the field, crouches and jumps over the damn thing. See him running full speed towards the trees behind the houses. Okay, so we get a lot of thefts here. Gypsies love copper cable and copper pipe, so we figure he's been left behind by his friends. Oh, look, it's the police. Blue lights everywhere. Yep, cable theft. Get out of the car, wander over to go see what's been stolen. Sirs, could you please get back in the car while we sort this mess out? I ask how much has been taken. The guy looks at me blankly. Turns out one of the patients from the new hospital escaped, and they had to search the entire site for him. Told them what I saw, and we just had to wait around in the compound for them to finish up. Took them hours, but they finally gave it the all clear. The fucking maniac had managed to get 10 miles away and tried to stab some kid to death. Funny it doesn't exactly inspire you to go back to work in empty houses after that sort of news. That place was supposed to be high security. They never did say how he got out. Another one got out a few years ago too, on a shopping trip of all things. The place is high security, for God's sake.
I live in Monterrey, Mexico, and there are a lot of urban legends in the downtown, since it is the oldest part of the city, around 420 years old. Most of the legends are about ghosts, mostly female, walking down the old colonial-style streets, gunfights that ended up in massacres, things like that. One of the most famous is La Leyenda de la Casa de Aramberri, the legend of the House of Aramberri Street. According to the legend, it happened around 1930. There was a family living in that house. One day, the father went to work normally, but when he returned, he found his family murdered. His son was bashed in the head with a metal pipe, and his daughter and wife were both murdered. According to police records, there was hair and blood under their nails, and the younger kids were stabbed in the neck around 5 times. The legend says that if you enter the place, you can smell a faint trace of sulfur in the air, and you can hear the cries of the daughter and the kids. And some people say that they've seen the mother standing in a corner, facing the wall, and crying out loud. Unfortunately, the house was demolished since a lot of people entered and got injured since the place was collapsing.
I live in Paris, and there are so many I don't even know where to start. There's stuff worth telling about everything. There's stuff about the Notre Dame Cathedral. It's said the ironwork on the doors is the work of the devil. It's the first occurrence of the Art Nouveau style, which is now the most prominent style in Paris, so some people now say Paris is a gate to hell. Then there's an old bookstore not far away. Some American X-Files once said it as a meeting point, and apparently it turned ugly. It's kinda owned by a sect, and there's something unusual to it. Then there's the obvious catacombs, the street where people used to be beheaded that's reportedly haunted, the ghost of the Tuileries garden who looks like a man covered with blood, the legends of weird things happening in the Louvre's museum because of all the cursed shit and mummies that can be found there. Not to mention the Egyptian mummies that have been found buried under a square that no one knew about, the ghost of the opera that haunted the 5th dressing room, the old druidic gathering areas, Nicolas Flamel's house whose walls vibrate, the Nestlé Tower where several young women were killed. It's crazy how many there are.
Some people have always got to be critics.
Well, the story is a bit more complex than that. A young man named Biscornet was once tasked with making the ironwork and locks of the central portal of Notre Dame. He wasn't really experienced, but it was a great honor, so he accepted. But the task wasn't easy. Some say it is because the doors were huge and his forge was far too small for the work. Others say that his design was so complex that it just couldn't be achieved. There was no way he could complete this work in time, and only a miracle could have helped him. Or something else along those lines. It is said that he made a pact with the devil and gave his soul in exchange for help, and the ironwork and locks were crafted in the forges of hell. His work was delivered on time, and it was breathtaking. To this day, it still is, and no one knows how he achieved such a masterpiece with the meager tools and techniques available back then, even if he had access to a much larger forge. People were so impressed that they came to see him in his workshop to ask him how he did it. He was nowhere to be found. But after the ironwork and locks were mounted on the portal, it wouldn't open anymore. They tried opening it for hours without success. until someone had the idea of throwing holy water on the portal. Several buckets were emptied and the portal finally opened. According to some, Biscornet was found later in a street of Paris. Others say that he was found inside the cathedral, behind the locked portal. Either way, he was dead. The ironwork was later stolen, and God knows where it is today. It was reproduced based on drawings and photographs in modern forges, which still required great efforts. And some say the new ones aren't as good as those of Biscornet. Whoever stole it pretty much has a gateway to hell.
I live in northern Montana near the Canadian border. Lots of the strange happenings deal with a horseman that the cops chased for hours and Native American magic and lore. One story that stayed with me was about a woman who was cheating on her husband. She would watch out the window for him, and the signal to meet him was a lit cigarette in the distance. Eventually, the husband got wise and went to a medicine man for advice. The advice given was to leave offerings of tobacco at each portal, doors, and windows. He would send spirits there to monitor her fidelity. So he did, and on the night of her and her lover's usual meeting, she saw no signal of him outside. She stayed up late into the night waiting. At last, a few hours later, she saw a red spark outside her window. Rushing to look, she opened the lace curtains to reveal an impossibly old woman, who grabbed her face and twisted it into a horrible visage. The identity of her lover was never known, and her infidelity showed on her face for the rest of her days. Now I know I'm no Stephen King, but that's how I heard it.
Indonesian here. I got one or two things to share. In 1987, in Bintaro, somewhere near South Jakarta, there was a huge accident where 2 trains crashed. Many passengers died in the accident. The news itself was spreading around the world because this was the biggest accident in train/railway history. Aside from that, around the railway where the accident happened, there are so many restless spirits roaming around. Disembodied legs, arms, or anything so fucked up are just really roaming around at night. Continued, this time is another one. Anyway, I'm sorry if my English isn't really good. This one was told to me by my friend 2 years ago. So my friend here, let's call him S, had an electrician friend who usually works for S family. Before working for S, the electrician guy was working as a maintenance crew for an arcade at a mall outside Jakarta. One night, when that electrician guy and his friend were doing monthly maintenance for the game machines at night, he felt some slight dread. After a while, they decided to sleep at the mall's arcade, and then the electrician and his friend were annoyed by ghosts. And the effect after that incident was he would feel some tingling around his body when he sleeps. The reason why the mall was haunted is because the front entrance of the arcade was a place to put dead bodies during 1998 Indonesia's economic crisis, which was leading to demonstrations, murdering, and raiding everywhere. So basically the mall was raided. The people, probably who worked in the shop inside the mall, were also killed by angry masses. And in the end, the mall was haunted until now, even though people are still visiting, probably because they don't know or remember the backstory of this.
Cheyenne, Wyoming, USA here. Lots of stuff around here. Supposed lynching spot along Industrial Road where it's also said witches, covens, and Satanists would do strange rituals and summon the spirits of the lynching victims that is apparently haunted. The Atlas Theater is apparently one of the most haunted places in the U.S. The story I heard was that back when it was a hotel and a vaudeville theater, it was also a pretty notorious bordello. One prostitute had a young child, a girl, and because they lived in only a single room, the little girl would play in the closet while mommy did her business. Only one time a John gets mad and cuts her up, killing her. Meanwhile, her daughter is so scared that she doesn't make any noise and dies in the closet due to it being locked from the outside. Mother and daughter both haunt the place. There are these huge tunnels beneath the place too that I've seen myself with lots of weird shit in them. Vivisected animal carcasses, little dollies made out of bird bones, weird scratches in the walls and stuff. I was in a play there a few years back, and I was upstairs in the costume room, what used to be a suite in the old hotel, and I felt such a heavy feeling of dread and this intense presence, and I almost panicked. There's allegedly another spirit there that no one knows or recognizes from historical photos or documents. He's a tall man in a cowboy-type get-up, duster and hat and such like, but black as an ink spot, like a solid shadow. Let's see. Lots of rumors of paganism, animism, witchcraft and whatnot at nearby rock formations called Vidau Wu. St. Mary's Catholic Church is allegedly haunted by the body of a Dutch bricklayer who fell into the concrete foundation of the building when it was laid and whose body was never recovered. Tom Horn, the famous range detective and alleged murderer, is supposed to haunt a hotel downtown. Cheyenne and Wyoming in general has a bloody and sordid past.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.